is up, everyone? I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for checking out my YouTube channel. Thank you for everyone who has subscribed to the channel and for everyone who's been leaving their comments and their rankings. I read each and every one of them, and I truly appreciate it. And I thank a lot of you for the kind words that I've received over my ranking videos. So far, I haven't, I guess, made anybody mad enough to where uh, they feel like they need to voice their opinion and really give it to me. But with that being said, this is going to be a different video today. I'm not ranking any franchises, but what I want to do is celebrate one of my favorite films. It's the 30th anniversary of none other than The Crow, starring the late Brandon Lee. When you think of Brandon Lee, you just kind of wonder what could have been. Brandon Lee was a up and coming action star, but not only action, in my opinion, he could play the drama part very well. And one of my other favorite films, and it's actually starring him, is Rapid Fire. That was a great film as well. But that being said, this is one of my personal favorite films. I mean, definitely in my top 10 films of all time. I remember watching this when it first came out in 94, and I recently watched it again, and it still holds up to this day. And I just wish that Brandon Lee could have been able to see the love that he got for this film and seen how this film, 30 years later, we're talking about it. And now, of course, they're putting out the special editions of 4Ks, Blu-rays, everything. So I wish that, like I said, he could have been able to see how popular the film got and how much love the film got. But anyway, what I want to do today is just pretty much discuss the film. And in my opinion, there is some films that I just feel like should never be touched. And I know they did the sequels to The Crow, and none of them even came close to touching the original. And I think what it was missing was the heart. Brandon Lee was the heart of The Crow. The cast was perfect in this film. And there was just so many things that I love about the film. But speaking of that, let's get into the cast. Of course, you got the one and only Brandon Lee playing Eric Draven. Rochelle Davis, she plays Sarah. We also have Michael Wincott. And I did not know this until this week, that his name was Top Dollar. Never knew that was his name in the movie. And he played one heck of a villain. We also got Fun Boy. And then, David Patrick Kelly played T-Bird. Another great actor, Ernie Hudson, played Sergeant Albert. We also have the one and only Tony Todd. And I don't know if they ever said his name, but I looked in the credits and his name, I believe, is Grange. That may be right. And then we also got Skank. We've got 1010. And of course, we have Eric Draven's love interest in this film, Shelley Webster. And then we have Sarah's mom, who is Darla. Overall, I think the cast did a phenomenal job in this film. The casting was perfect. I don't feel like there was a weak person in this movie. And I don't know if it's just me, but what makes this movie stand out is, one, this was one of the very first dark comic films to ever been made. I think what makes this movie stand out to me is the vibes that you get from the movie. Right off the bat, when it starts off, you already have the story. There's Eric Draven. He's been thrown out the window. Shelley Webster, they're taking her in the ambulance to the hospital. And Sarah is talking to Sergeant Albert. And, he says something like, your mom is going to be okay. And she's like, she's not my mom. She goes, she's my friend. Just that little dialogue right there, I feel like touches your heartstrings, because already off the bat, you can tell that this girl doesn't really have a good home life, in my opinion. And then, of course, when it goes into the 1 year later, and you can hear Sarah's voice coming over the film. Like I said, the girl Sarah, the character, I think her acting was great. I think that she played the sentimental, almost sentimental kind of um loner attitude. I think she played that very well, if that makes any sense. Like, you would see her where she didn't need anybody. She was a skateboarder. She didn't really have a good mom to depend on. But then later in the film, when um, Darla runs into Eric Draven, and he makes his famous line to her. He's got her arm and he's squeezing the heroin out of her arm, and he says, "Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children." And then he's holding her by the face, and he's like, "Your daughter is in the streets." Like, that just totally changed her. And when Sarah gets up later in the film and she sees that her mom's, she looks healthy, she's in there cooking. She just played that. Um, I guess you would say she plays that tough girl where she was like, "What are you doing, Darla?" But then when she realized that she kind of hurt Darla's feelings, and Darla's like, "Well, I'm just never been good at this mother stuff." And she's like, "Whoa," and then she talks to her about the eggs and stuff. Like I said, I think the chemistry between all the characters, their scenes are phenomenal. Uh, my favorite scene of this movie is where Sergeant Albert has finally realized who Eric Draven is, who the guy was that he almost arrested earlier in the night. And then Brandon Lee, or Eric Draven, whatever you want to call him, comes into his house. And just that whole dynamic where he's like, he goes to his fridge, he grabs a beer and he hands it to him. And he goes, Sergeant Albert goes, "Are you a ghost?" And he's like, "Boo." The playful stuff, but then when he talks about what happened to Shelley, you know, and then Eric Draven walks up to him and puts his hands on his head. And right when he starts to do that, you hear this soft music come in, and it really gets the tone of that scene. And he sees that Sergeant Albert never left Shelley's side. And that's what he says. He says, I saw her through your eyes." Just the writing in this film is still wonderful. But that right there, that scene to me is one of the best scenes in the entire movie. And another thing about this movie is I love the lighting. Like, they really knew how to light certain fixtures, like especially when they were using Eric Draven's face, where he was almost like a silhouette, but you could just see the white popping out. Also, one of my favorite scenes is the fight scene between Eric Draven and Tintin, and that fight they have where Tintin just lit a cigarette and Eric Draven's walking toward the burning barrel, but they really highlighted the flames in the barrel, and then it shows Eric Draven's white paint. Great shot, and that entire fight scene was good. And one thing I did like, I really enjoyed this, was, to me, this is not a martial arts movie. Brandon Lee did Rapid Fire, and then he did another film with Dolph Lundgren where it was all martial arts. And, you know, he's got that title as Bruce Lee, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu, martial arts, whatever you want to call it, legend of all time. He's got that reputation to live up to because, I mean, that's his father. But in this film, they didn't focus on that. They made the fight scenes more realistic fight scenes where it wasn't roundhouse kicks and stuff like this. It was more of street fighting. And I really enjoyed that, where they didn't just pigeonhole Brandon Lee. Another part that I really enjoy is when Eric Draven goes to the pawn shop, and I'm not going to describe that entire scene, but it's when he's looking for Shelley's ring that he got for Shelley. It was their engagement ring. They were going to get married on Halloween. I love the scene where he goes back there and he holds the box up, and he's got all these rings in this box. And as he's doing this, he's got his eyes closed and he's going, "No, no, no." You can hear him. And all of a sudden he finds the ring and he kind of like twitches, like all the emotions hit him. Uh, love that scene. It's so much of a sad love story that I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to recreate that. Love how Eric Draven sees things through the crow's eyes. like the crow is leading him um, through the entire film. I really enjoy that. Another great death scene in the movie, but it's also a fun scene in my opinion, is where T Bird and Skank, which I think they're phenomenal characters in the movie, especially Skank because he just seems like a goofball. But they're constantly fire it up, you know. And he tells T Bird tells Skank, you know, go in there and get the smokes, get the snacks, whatever. So he goes in there to get it, Skank does, and T Bird goes in to get in his car, and all of a sudden the crow lands on his hood, and then out of nowhere, Eric Draven sets up from the back seat and pulls a gun on him, and he's like, "What the? You know, what are you supposed to be?" And Eric Draven's like, "I'm your passenger." He takes the cigar out of his mouth, he drops it, he goes, "Drive." Uh, that whole chase scene where the cops are chasing T Bird and Eric Draven, but Skank is behind them trying to catch him the whole time. Phenomenal scene. Love how they threw the two cops in there where it actually almost had a comedic sense to it, to where he's holding the coffee and soon he's like, "What the crap?" And he throws the coffee out, and then the other guy's got the coffee spilling on him. And then Skank, he's in my opinion, he's hilarious. Just how, like, when he sees T Bird, he's like, "T Bird," you know. Uh, Sorry if that was loud, but I get excited talking about this movie. But then the big scene where he's duct taping T Bird to his front seat. And he was like, "The little lady wasn't doing what we wanted her to do," and you know, blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, he goes, "That was ancient history." He goes, why? What are you bringing that up for?" And he's like, "What do you matter? Speak to me." And all of a sudden, he pulls that duct tape out, Eric Draven, and then the camera just pans on Eric Draven's face, and he's like, "I know you. I knew you, but you can't be you." He's like, "There ain't no coming back." And I love that because the whole time he's duct taping T Bird's head to the seat, he's just, "There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back." And then he starts reading or saying the line that he said before he killed Shelley about the devil stood and seen how uh, whatever he says. And I don't know. I guess that was a bomb or something, but he lights it, throws it between his legs, puts it in drive, and the car takes off. Again, as it's flying down it looks like a dock going into water. You just see Eric Draven get this lighter fluid, and he's just doing this. You see his hand. Skank's watching it from the side. All of a sudden, it goes back to the car fixing to fly off, and all of a sudden, he's like, "T Bird," and boom! All of a sudden, as soon as he does it, it lights up. You see Eric Draven throw a lighter down, and one of the most iconic scenes after it blows up, T Bird and his car blows up. You see that what he was doing, Eric Draven was making with the lighter fluid, ended up being a crow. And just phenomenal camera shots in this movie. Love it, love it. One of my favorite lines that really stuck out to me in this film is when the first time that Sergeant Albert sees Eric Draven. It was just after he blew up the pawn shop, and he says something about Tintin shouldn't play with knives, and he's like the coat. He's like, "You're the one that killed Tintin." And then Eric Draven just puts his head down, and he's like, "He was already dead. He died a year ago, the moment he touched her." And then he looks up at him, and he says, "They're all dead. They just don't know it yet." Love that line. It's so good. Like I said, just watching this film, every time I watch it, I'm just like, man, I just wish I could have seen what Brandon Lee could have been like, man. Um, I really think his career just would have skyrocketed after this movie, man. But overall, like I said, I feel like the lighting in this movie was great. The camera work was great. Yes, I know it was 94, so some of the effects, like where Eric Draven's running across the building tops, maybe that doesn't look as good as it could now, but it's still the simple fact that it's been 30 years and this film still holds up. The final fight scene with Eric Draven and Top Dollar when they're up on the roof, that's another emotional but action packed scene where they're fighting. And I love the part where Eric Draven grabs it's almost like a metal rod. I don't know if remember if it was a cross or something, but he grabs it, lightning strikes it, and he screams, and all of a sudden he turns around and Top Dollar has the sword, and they're just fighting back and forth. But I really, truly enjoy the way that Eric Draven finishes Top Dollar when he's like, there's something I don't want to give you. I don't want it anymore. And all of a sudden he puts his hands on Top Dollar's head, and he's like 30 hours of pain. And he just starts giving every single bit of those 30 hours of pain to Top Dollar within seconds. And he just lets him go and falls to his death, lands on the spiked fence. Man, it's such a great film that there's really hardly anything to really disagree with, or really anything to dislike about the movie. With that being said, there's always been 5 movies that I've always said I never wanted to see be remade. That is Back to the Future, The Breakfast Club, Rocky, First Blood, and The Crow. And unfortunately, before I announced that I was going to do this video, I did not know that they were actually going forward with the remake of The Crow, which is coming out later this year. But I understand that they want to make it more for this generation, and I get that. But I'm always going to say, what is wrong with the generation now watching these films, these older films? Because like I said, especially this one, it still holds up. Plus, in my opinion, and you may disagree, I feel like it's disrespectful to Brandon Lee because the man died making this film, and this was his last performance, and it was such a phenomenal performance that I just don't think it should be touched. And if they were going to do another Crow, don't name him Eric Draven. Make him a whole nother character. But to get off that, because I'm not bashing that film, I just don't necessarily agree with it. And like I said, it hasn't even been released. But yes, 30 years ago, 1994, this film was released. I still think it holds up. I still think the acting is great. The action is great. The camera work, the lighting, the story. I just don't think that I don't think the new Crow is going to be able to live up to the story that this original film told. But with that being said, that is my thoughts and my opinions on this movie. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a short video, but I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. And as always, if you want to hear more on any kind of like horror movies, remember that I have a podcast called Small Town Horror with Johnny and Randy, and we're available on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're available. But my next ranking video will be none other than the Chucky series, and I will not be including the Chucky TV series 1, 2, and 3. I'm not including those. It's just the Chucky films. But anyway, I hope you like this video. Leave your thoughts of The Crow in the comments. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. Do you still think that this film holds up 30 years later? So, as always, God bless each and every one of you, and thank you so much. And until next time, see you later.
Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood, an afternoon that is so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it? Perhaps 4 or 5 times more, perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20, and yet it all seems limitless.